Hello, welcome to the Rooms with Ronald podcast, brought to you by the Multifamily Media Network. I'm your host, Ronald Harrington. In 2023, I set an intention to shop 100 apartment communities to see how leasing was evolving around the country. Rooms with Ronald was born out of that experience. In this series, I share my experiences and engage in meaningful conversations with other professionals in the industry as we discuss all things related to leasing and marketing. Join in as we expand the Rooms with Ronald experiment. Hello, and welcome to a very special edition of Rooms with Ronald. I'm your host, Ronald Harrington, and I have a very special guest with you guys today. Let me just tell you, this is the 50th episode of Rooms with Ronald. Hey, I can't believe you have been listening for 50 episodes now. But when I was thinking about who I wanted to bring on to be the 50th guest on the show, there was one person that instantly popped to my mind, and that is Sarah Weeman, who is the regional manager for Reach by Rent Cafe. Sarah, thanks for joining me.
First of all, happy 50th episode. This is so exciting. Thank you for having me. I feel so honored to be here.
Thanks. And let me tell you why, for the listeners, why, hey, this episode's special, why you had to be on the 50th episode. So Rooms with Ronald, I've always kind of done leasing. I kind of had this idea I would travel around and like record different videos and comment from like the hottest takes in whatever city I was in during COVID. And then that never really kind of launched. And so Sarah used to be my boss at a former company. And I actually kind of just like owe her everything that Rooms with Ronald is and kind of like my brand, because she's the one that really encouraged me when I had this idea to shop 100 properties across the country. And I went to her and I did this. I'm like, Sarah, I'm going to do this. And she's the one that was like, run with it, go make it happen. So I could not imagine anyone else, Sarah, coming on and having these conversations today.
Well, I'm just grateful to be here. And I think that to this day is like the coolest project anyone's ever done. And I remember sitting and talking with you about your experiences with those 100 shops and things you learned and things you observed. And I just think it was an invaluable experience for you to have. So, and I think it like, I remember a specific conversation that you and I had too, where I said, you are a marketer, Ronald, and you're doing all these marketing things. So everyone will appreciate all your knowledge that you have to share with combining, like not just leasing and all the things that you do to support Onsite teams, but how you can bring other departments together to make it all fit like the perfect Rubik's Cube that it is. So I'm so glad to be here. So thank you.
It's so funny that you mentioned that, because I was going to say, do you remember the first time we met? We were in a conference room, and I literally did tell you, I was like, I'm not a marketer, like, you know. And so, which brought me to today's episode, right? And I think because, you know, I was coming from Onsite, I worked in training at the time. I feel like there's a misconception of what marketing is, and there's this disconnect, right, from the Onsite teams and what they think marketing is to what marketing really is. And I think that conversation, I think back to that very often, and you very put it into perspective. You said, what do you think marketing is? And I told you, and you're like, no, that's not marketing, but you are a marketer. So it's so funny that we both have that thought. But before we dive in, I also have to congratulate you on being one of the 20 on the Rise recipients for 2025. So that's a big accomplishment.
Well, I have you to thank for it because you gave me the confidence and the nomination first and foremost, but the confidence to actually apply and think that I could be nominated. So thank you. And I'm super excited to see everyone at NAA and meet the rest of the people that received the nomination and the award, because I think it's awesome. I love learning together and growing together, and it's fun to finally have this moment. You know, I was a little jealous I wasn't invited on earlier, but I'm glad to be here for 50th. So
I had a very special plan for you. It was always in the wheelhouse. So let's kind of like dive in, right? So from your perspective, what is the biggest misconception Onsite teams have about marketing?
That marketers are just here to make things pretty. I think that is something I've been told over and over again in my career. And I think for a long time, there was this. Well, let's go back to the base of marketing, right? For a long time, there's been like two folds of marketing. There's been sales marketing, which is what on-site teams, I think, do so phenomenally, and how you train them is marketing. And then there's this side of marketing that's putting your brand out there, making the brand cohesive, making it look good. And I think when people carry the true marketing title, people think that that's what marketers do, is they just make things look pretty, and that's not the case anymore. And I think marketing is now analytical. It's not just about what you put out, but also how you interpret the success of it. And marketing is not just a cost center, but a revenue driver. And I think those are like the biggest misconceptions, is marketers are just here to spend money and make things pretty. But in the reality, I always joke with people, I could turn off all your websites. How would you market your property?
Right. And I feel like too, because that was my thing, right? I was like, I can't design a flyer to save my life. Like I can give you a vision. I can tell you what I see in my head. I can tell you if it looks good or not looks good, but to like sit down and actually design it. And I remember when they're like, you're moving to marketing, that was like my biggest fear. I was like, oh, I can't do that. So, but I do think you're right. I remember we spent a lot of time together kind of talking about quality versus quantity. And, we would deep dive into this. And I remember going around to sites and having these conversations, and the people's faces really just like, what do you mean you want to cut my leads in half? And you and I were like, well, we want to give you the leads that are going to attract the demographics and the clientele that you want to attract. That way you don't have to chase the wheel.
Right. I mean, I think something that just occurred to me, which I've never said this before, but I don't know what sparked this idea, is whether you're on the sales side, working on site, working those leads to turn into leases and an actual residence, or you're on the digital marketing side, putting together plans to attract those leads, both sides of that funnel are storytellers. And you are lifestyle creators, and you are there to sell people quite literally on what life will look like when they call a community home. So I think that would actually be an awesome idea, and maybe something we can continue to explore to make sticky in the industry, is that how do we make the stories work together? And that would bridge some of these gaps where you have like marketing versus ops, but we're all here for the common goal, and that's to sell the story of what it's like to live at one of your communities.
Yeah, I've been this year, like when I've been going around to sites, like I was at a site and like this activity just kind of hit me, right? And so like usually when I do a leasing training or I'm working one-on-one with someone, the first thing I say is, what is the lifestyle that you're selling? Right? Like how would you describe that to me? That so let's you'd be surprised how many people can't. And then the second question I is what does it actually mean to be a resident at this community? Right? So you can sell me this lifestyle, and marketing does that, right? They put all these fancy words, they make it look good. Sometimes it gets lost in translation to the on-site teams. But what does it mean when I move in? And and so like things like that. And it starts to see this shift in people's like mentality. They're like, oh, I'm like every interaction that you have to do like goes back to those two main points.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. And I think something that I've observed, and I've seen different companies and how they function. And now in my role that I get to learn about so many different clients and how they see marketing versus how they see leasing. For me, when I was on the client side of the industry, something that I always felt was really important was the inclusion of the on-site team into that storytelling. Like I loved going on site, talking to managers, talking to leasing agents and other consultants that might be at the property, so that I was learning what the property actually was, so that my story that would come out from a digital perspective would convey what the on-site team is seeing. Because I could go and Google a property, look at their pictures, see where they're located, and write a story, and it could be completely false. And if you don't include the on-site team and empower them to be a part of the conversation, I feel like there's a huge gap between what your digital story says and what that lifestyle at the community actually offers.
Which I'm glad you brought you talked about the on-site team. So what do you wish that every leasing consultant knew about how marketing actually works?
I think the first thing is the power of the leasing consultant's voice in the marketing story can actually, I think, make or break the marketing strategy. I truly believe that. I really hope that if you do work on site and you're listening to this, that you feel empowered to speak up if you see something from a marketing standpoint that doesn't feel right or it might be incorrect, because your input can make a big difference. So that's not even the answer to your question, but that's just one part, I think. And I think going back to marketing is not just there to make sure you look good, but marketing is also there to analyze the dollars spent versus the dollars earned. And yes, sometimes if marketing comes and says we're going to make a cut to say an ILS provider or we're going to add this service, try to be open minded and less resistant to it, and give grace to marketing that things don't always take effect overnight. There might be a little ramp up period to really see the results, but marketing is trying to make smart strategic decisions to not break the bank, but also give you those quality leads that you need to get people to move in.
I feel like I've heard you say, and I've done some research though, like when we're making kind of our, you know, SEO spend and our PPC spend and all of that, that takes around what, 30 days to kind of like ramp up and to go into effect.
Yeah, so PPC is more of like a sprint and SEO's a marathon. So studies suggest SEO takes effect like 60 to 90 days from implementation. Keep in mind, implementation could be 2 weeks. There's a lot of nuts and bolts that go into SEO, a lot of things that you don't see on the actual website that go into SEO to make SEO work. I personally think that to get a full picture of what your SEO is doing, though, you need a year. There's probably people that would disagree with me on this, but I think of SEO as that long-term marathon. It's the long-term health and infrastructure of your website to continue to function and make accommodations with Google's ever-changing algorithms. PPC is more of like the trigger effect. I need an ad quickly. Whoever you use, whether it's on a third party provider like Reach, or if it's someone in your office that's an expert in PPC, to give them the grace to make those ads work, review the ads, and then they activate them. Those, I would still say, take about 30 days, like to your point, to take effect. None of these are like turning the faucet of water on and suddenly the floodgates are going to open and leads and leads and leads are going to come in. That happens with, I think, some of the ILS providers, but keep in mind, they might not always be the most qualified people. They might be looky-loos. I would say, and from my experience, like 80% of the time, those people that actually come to your website, spend time on your site, are the more qualified leads that you will actually see take the next steps to either coming on site and visiting, maybe applying to a unit and effectively moving in.
Yeah, and so we talk about like those floodgates, which brings me to like a twofold question here, right? So, have you ever heard like the someone say we need more leads, or because we need occupancy and we're struggling, we need them now, or the leads that I have are bad. They're unqualified. So what are some ways that you could kind of help bridge the gap to communicate what that means to the on-site teams, or the on-site teams can more effectively communicate to the marketers?
Well, I think that was my favorite email is I need more leads. When I was on the client side, that is a weekly email that I would get. I think it goes back to having those conversations, and marketing teams, when you get those emails, picking up the phone or setting up a meeting with that on-site team, not just with the regional manager, the property manager, but include the team, because I think everyone's feedback is valuable, to really understand what they mean. Saying I don't have enough qualified leads is very vague. I think on-site teams, if those emails are coming in or you're giving that feedback to marketing, have points like, most of the leads we're getting from this source are unqualified. Is there anything we could do to maybe change this source and put the money somewhere else. Come with those ideas and come with that feedback, because I feel like together then you're a more powerful unit as a cohesive team, and the decisions can be made strategically what would be best. But if you just write a vague email, I need more qualified leads, I mean, from a marketing perspective, it's so hard to understand what you mean by that. I think the other thing too is quality and quantity. There's relativity between the two. But I'm going to throw this back at you a little bit. If you're working on site, would you rather have to answer 1,000 or respond to 1,000 guest cards that are dropping off and not answering you, or 100 guest cards, but every person's responsive and you get greater feedback and have more momentum with that?
Oh, well, all day AI is going to be doing that, right? Um, but I do think that's right? I'd rather have to focus 100 on the 100 because I know they're going to come in and that's going to be more money in my pocket. But that shift is so hard to have because people have done marketing that way, right? Let's just throw money into marketing. We need more leads, so we're going to give you 1,000 more leads. But no one actually looks at, did those 1,000 leads convert? Did they come in, and things like that? So I think having that skill set of understanding, like, okay, that source, not the greatest. Do we need it for exposure and a lease up? Probably, right? But that's where I'm going to let the AI and I'm going to let the automation kind of help. And then, I like to look at reports and say, this source, I'm qualifying 70% that are coming in. Out of that 70%, 50% are applying. That's where I, as someone on site, is going to focus my energy to get them to continue that strategy.
And on-site teams too, I think something for marketers out there is when on-site teams say they're busy, they are busy. Marketers, go out and spend time, like sit with a leasing consultant for a day, sit with a property manager, learn about their day to day, because that can also have a big impact on the conversation when you see how the cadence of that office is, right? So, like an example, you might be a property in an urban area downtown where you do actually get walk ins and foot traffic. That is a totally different scenario than if you're a suburban property where, maybe your population might be more of like soon to be retirees and they need a little bit more support when it comes to some resident relations. Like every property functions differently, is the point. So I think for marketers, getting out there and getting to know those cadences to the best of your ability will also help the on-site teams trust when you're having this conversation of, I need more leads or I need more qualified leads, because you're also getting to know each other and what each other's roles are.
Yeah, I can agree. Which brings me to kind of, why do you think there's a disconnect sometimes between the marketing strategy and then the on-site execution?
I think for a long time, because marketing in general, and this is not just our industry, in general, has been seen as like a cost center and not so much a place that drives revenue, that shared knowledge of what marketing in the digital space actually is, I don't think is as widely received. Um, and I think when companies take the time to educate all departments on what other departments do, I think that really creates like a really robust dynamic. And I truly believe that on-site teams, it's not to say there's a lack of knowledge. On-site team folks are super smart. Well, I don't know how they do what they do because there's a million moving pieces and they put them all together to make those properties function. But I think marketers need to do a better job of explaining what it is that they are actually doing. Like, not everyone's going to understand SEO, and that's okay. But how can you make it that you can walk the same walk and people can understand what you're actually trying to implement and what it does?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we tend to feel like we get stuck in this bubble, right? Like, oh, we're at 80%, we had to get the leads. And I don't feel like from a corporate level, a lot of times we do a great job at communicating the strategy and why the strategy is that. And there's that communication breakdown, right? It's just like, oh, well, ops is coming in and saying, we have 60 days to get to 95%. We have to do this. We need to do this. Now the on-site team becomes stressed because they're like, okay, well, I need to go to marketing and marketing needs to do this. And it's just like that data, there's that disconnect into there. So I think like everyone has to do a better job of communicating what the strategy is. And sometimes the strategy is simple, right? Like we're not going to focus on occupancy, we're going to focus on rate. And that's going to change the marketing campaign, but you need to communicate that to the people who actually have to go execute it.
Right. I think I believe too that how do I want to phrase this? Let me think quickly. I think the interesting thing about all of this from a marketing perspective is marketing is not a one size fits all. For a long time during COVID, I think leasing was easy. I think people were unzipping their wallets, making decisions faster, moving at a different rate. You know, we had phenomenal occupancies across the United States. We had this like migration of people to changing their lifestyle, moving to new areas. I think it, and it's, I'm not saying it easy, like the job was easy, but like it was just easier. And I think times are changing. And it's coming back to like on-site teams really having to sell the properties and ensuring that they have the tools to do so. And I think one of those tools is ensuring that they understand what their marketing team's doing to help them be successful. Marketers, though, if you don't communicate to your on-site teams, how are you ever going to know if there's like a new lease up down the street, or if a property down the road caught on fire and now all these people are displaced and you might want to, put a campaign together to attract those people to move into your property? Things like that, like the communication, I think, is king. And marketing is communication, and sales is communication too. So it to this day mind boggles me that sometimes there's this gap of communication between ops and marketing. And how do you fix that? Maybe companies get the idea of having like regional marketing SPOCs or people that are subject matter experts that can help coach on-site teams if a marketing team is slimmer. Maybe it's marketing goes on site and has seminars every so many weeks to different regions to teach them about what they're doing, the trends they're seeing. Maybe it's working with the Ronalds of the world and having your trainees being confident enough to go up and talk to on-site teams in training of what marketing plans are and how they look. I think it just really comes down to like educating each other on what it is the other person is doing.
Yeah, you brought up a good point about like COVID, and it was so much easier, right? Like the demand was there, the supply was not. So how do you handle it when on-site teams want to cut their spending because they're full, right? They're like, we're going to pause all marketing efforts, right? Like we don't need to market anymore because here we're at 99% full, and that's so. How do we kind of like handle that, and like what is kind of that ripple effect to a property when they do that?
I think this really goes to the marketers out there too, of making sure you have a marketing strategy that has flexibility in it. For a long time, marketing was sign every property up for every ILS under the sun. And we all know how ILS contracts work. There's little flexibility. I like to think that there's one or two ILSs in the world per property that work really well, that drive results. The conversions are great and it doesn't break the bank. Complementing that with, say, your website strategy, the SEOs and the PPCs of the world. But the PPC, for example, is something that's flexible. You can adjust the budget, you can pause it, you can reinstate it. Having those triggers and mechanisms in place so that when you do hit 99% occupied, you can peel some of that onion back. And then when you're not 99% occupied, because we all know if you're 100% occupied, it's not going to last forever, that you can put those products or those services or strategies back in place to recuperate that momentum and get people through the door. Again, SEO is long term. I would never recommend pausing SEO. I would look more into maybe scaling back some of your ILSs, or, using PPC where you can adjust the budgets more regularly, and that way you don't have to overspend all the time. And I think for on-site teams too, if you're 99% occupied, you're doing a phenomenal job. But also then for on-site teams, think about retention and what does retention look like? And it's cheaper to keep people than to attract people. So what is the on-site team doing to implement strategies to support those drawbacks of marketing? So if you're asking marketing to scale back, can you reallocate those resources maybe to resident events or resident life to get people really involved in that community and make them want to stay there even longer because they would have FOMO if they moved away?
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is marketing is a lot of data. And I don't think people
It's a lot of
truly
data.
understand, right? You're looking at that. So do you think that um, on-site teams understand the data behind the marketing?
I think I think on-site teams do understand the data. I think marketing and on-site look at the data differently. So like an example, as someone when I was reviewing marketing strategies, the twoest KPIs that I found to be the most important for me in reviewing a strategy was the cost per lease and the return on ad spend. Whereas I think someone on site is probably looking at the conversion from prospect to tour to move in. And then maybe the one that they share would be like the effective income from the marketing sources. But I think there's an understanding of the data. It's just how does each silo look at the data? And are there ways to bridge the gaps in how you look at the data? Like I love sitting down with regional managers in particular and talking to them about what's important to them because I feel like they have a very unique perspective. They're looking sort of at both sides of the coin. I think again, like on-site teams just look at data differently. I mean, throwing this back to you a little bit, like when you're training on-site teams and you're teaching them about important KPIs, is some of the KPIs that you're looking at?
I mean, so a lot of our sites teams aren't into the budget and like looking at the in-depth, but I'm looking at like I'll have them break it down by source and really understand like how many leads are you getting from each source, how many people are touring, how many people are applying, how many people are actually moving in because we know people will apply and never move in. So I'm looking at that. The other thing that I'm also looking at for them is I want you to really drill down into how many people booked the tour to how many people actually showed up because that says a lot about a source too to me from the aspect of some sources the only option is to book the tour before you can get any information, so there's a disconnect there. So like I really want them to understand that, and I really want them to really look at their follow-up data and say, okay, when the automation went, they didn't respond, but when I sent the personalized email or the text or the phone call, here's the response, and kind of breaking it down that way.
Yeah. So I think just between the way you and I both described this, we are looking at things differently. So I wonder if there's a way, like, and you're a genius when it comes to training and figuring out bridging these gaps and making things work. I wonder if there's a way that maybe over the next 3 or 4 months, you and I can come up with some shared KPIs and have like a reunion episode and we could share some of those things that we found that would make sense to both parties. I think it's really interesting too from a marketing standpoint when you ask on-site teams how's marketing going and they say, oh my gosh, Zillow, I don't know why I'm just picking one out of a hat, is driving 1,000 leads every month, but unfortunately and then I look at it and then I say, but Zillow only has one move in.
Yeah.
So like it's looking at things differently. Maybe there's some benchmarks. Every company is a little different. I used to make up my own benchmarks, and get them approved, of course. But I used to think that like if a source wasn't driving at least one move in per month, there was an issue.
Yeah. So this is a fun one. What's one thing that on-site teams do that unintentionally sabotages a great marketing campaign?
Oh my gosh.
I
To
have
be
some
honest,
thoughts.
I want to hear your thoughts because I need to ponder on this one. This is a great question. The word sabotage might be throwing me off. So
And it's unintentional, right? And I think it all like for me when I hear this question, I think about we could have the cream of the crop leads coming in all day, right? Like, I mean, they're ready to move in. But if the on-site team does not do their part and actually follow up with them, then that marketing strategy is no good. Like that's when we're taking the money and we're just lighting it on fire. And if anyone needs to do that, don't light the money on fire. Please send it to me.
And me, I'll take part of that.
Right. Yes, we'll share it.
Oh, that's a great point. So yeah, follow up, I think, is really important. One that you just pointed out. I think something that is going back to this idea of making things pretty. I used to have years ago within one of my portfolios before we had rolled out a way to manage the branding and have checks and balances on how things were being published. With all the best intention, on-site teams would make flyers and things for events, and they would be totally different than the look, the tone, and the feel of how we were publicly representing the property. And I think that it's not to say it's sabotage, but I think that's where you're getting into these mixed messages. And we're in a world right now where branding is paramount. The crispiness, the fluidity, the elegance, the design, the intention behind branding is so important to the messaging and to make people feel comfortable to unzip a third of their paycheck and pay rent every month, that when you do have these like things that could throw the brand off kilter, so to speak, it's not detrimental to the marketing strategy, but there is a recovery point from it.
Yeah. I think the other thing too that can unintentionally sabotage is the tech adoption, right? Like everyone has this tech and when you roll out an AI, you roll out automation, there's this misconception that from a leasing standpoint, I don't have to touch it, right? They're going to do that and they don't understand that process. And I think that little knowledge could go a long way to kind of ensure that brand consistency, that the handoff is being handled correctly and things like that.
Oh, 1,000%. The another thing that it's definitely getting better. Photography is a big one. I think with all the best intentions in the world, I've seen on-site teams go and take pictures of units and they ask the marketing team to then upload to the website or something like that. We're again in a moment in time where content is king, quality is king, and it's not to criticize anyone's photo skills. Some people have it, some people don't. But an iPhone photo isn't a great look on a website that has all 4K high res, and then you have a few iPhone pictures people can tell. By all means, go use those pictures on social media, edit them, make them look, polished within reason. But let marketing get the pictures of your property from professionals for websites and digital advertising because it can make all the difference.
And I think those iPhone photos are great for the follow-up photos because like if I'm following up with you as a person, like I want to see that it's real. I don't want to see the marketing photos, right? Like I
Right.
can go to the website. Like I want you to make me feel special. So I think that's there. And then this last thing I've been thinking about for like the last couple weeks because I shop a lot of properties and this is happening. Do you think that when automation happens and they do what I call the cold reach out, 9 to 10 months after you initially looked, if you didn't choose there, do you think that that plays into any renter's decision to come back and retake a look?
I mean, I'm sure. I think I'm I'm curious sometimes as someone who I've rented for years myself, what is the driving force behind someone not moving in? If the property checks all the criteria that you want, the price is right, the tour went well, the on-site team made you feel supported. Life circumstance happens sometimes and people don't move. So I do think reaching out months later, because there might be a sprinkle of folks that didn't move because a circumstance happened where they couldn't at that time, to reach back out and re-engage. I'm sure you'll find a few people. And I don't think there's any harm in that. Or, they might have friends or family members that are looking and you're, you know, doing the right thing. I think all companies now in every industry reach out. I get all the time, you left things in your shopping cart. We haven't seen you in a while. Like, it is a little creepy, but it, I think definitely long-term follow-up can definitely yield to people moving in and be meaningful to them. I am curious though, from your perspective on training, you've mentioned AI and automation a bunch of times today. Like, how do you think it's going? And like, what do you see the future of like these new techs coming into play from a leasing standpoint? And what do leasing teams need to like practice or have instilled in them when they are engaging in these techs? Because I'm sure it's changing your whole process.
It is. I think too, like for a leasing agent, it's the fear that they're going to take their job. I'm like, it's not going to take your job. It's going to enhance it. I think there is a gap between the handoff, like from the AI to the human. There's a big gap, right? We're not going to read the conversations that are happening. We are getting frustrated and saying we're just going to take over the process from start to finish, and which then kind of hinders, right? Because you're paying for the AI and the automation. But people don't understand too that just because the AI is doing the follow up, and I always explain to that those are the quantity follow-ups, right? Like it's the same message over and over and over across everything. But you as a leasing agent, you can pick up the phone. You can build that excitement. You as a leasing agent can send a customized text message. So I think that it's coming there, and the leasing agents who can leverage that technology and understand like this is just a tool. I get busy. It's midnight. I can't be there, but when I come in, I can go in and look and see. I can add the little personalization. I can build that excitement to come in. Those are the people who are going to excel going forward and use that as their advantage. So that's kind of where I see like the biggest skill set, like kind of gap.
It's That's a really interesting gap. That's not one I've heard. I love that. I think going back to your like question about what could be detrimental, I think companies are implementing AI and they set it up and they let it run and do its job. And I've heard from friends in the industry that their AI is sassy or, very blunt. And I think where companies might be missing the step a little bit, and this is not leasing team's job by any means, but if you are leasing and you're working on site, I encourage you to interact with your chatbot so you know how it functions and like the tone that comes back to you. And if you feel that the tone is not conveying that marketing message and that branding message, the bot needs to be nurtured and trained. And that's this whole thing about like AI learning is I think companies are going to need to constantly be monitoring and educating their bots to sound and look and feel like more humanistic and to carry that tone. Because I'm sorry, a bot, if it's sassy towards me, I might not want to come visit and move in there. So I feel like that AI is still new and it's evolving, but it's the fastest moving train I've ever seen being implemented. But I think you can't forget to train it. Like, don't forget to train your bot. And I think that's another opportunity for on-site teams to give feedback. I can't tell you that marketing is responsible for all bots. There's probably different decision makers for this technology in every firm, but work with your on-site teams to make sure that the bot isn't sassy, and on-site teams test the bots a lot, frequently. Like, keep an
I
eye on
can't tell you
them.
how many times I put in a guest card and it didn't go into the system, right? Or I put in a guest card and it went to the wrong property and things like that.
Yeah.
Sarah, do you have any final words of wisdom for on-site teams, how we can better bridge the gap between on-site teams and marketing?
I think I think just really raising your hand and speaking up and engaging with your marketing team and know that your marketing team is there to support you. Um, I think we'll continue to bridge the gap. And like I said, maybe you and I can come back in a few episodes with a list of KPIs from an on-site standpoint and a marketing standpoint to help bridge those gaps and educate folks. But I just feel like we're at a really exciting time in the industry. And even from when I started in the industry at what am I, year 7 in multifamily, it's evolved so much and it's empowering and it's exciting. And if you're new to the industry and leasing, the world is your oyster, and like grab the bull by the horns, learn as much as you can and work with onsite and onsite work with corporate, because I think together you're just more powerful cohesively. I mean, I loved working with Ronald. I learned more from Ronald than like many, many other peers that I've worked with before, just because he's so inquisitive and like I think being inquisitive in multifamily yields a lot of success and returns. So
I couldn't agree more. Well, Sarah, thank you so much for joining the 50th episode of Rooms with Ronald. Thanks for building me up. You talk a lot about brand. You really kind of helped me define my brand and what I am and all those things all those years ago. So thank you so much for being a great friend, a mentor, all of those fun things.
thank you for having me. Happy 50th. I can't wait to be here for 100. And Ronald, you're fantastic. I love listening to all your guests and all the stuff that you share with the industry. So keep doing what you're doing. And I can't wait to see you at NAA. Oh, and AIM. AIM. Can't wait to see you at AIM. But
Hey, and until next time, guys, happy leasing. Bye.
happy leasing.
Thank you for tuning in today. I hope I left you with some fresh ideas or a new perspective. Leasing and marketing are evolving rapidly, and Rooms with Ronald is committed to offering a place to hear about those changes. We also celebrate and acknowledge the fundamentals of exceptional service that will never go out of style. So, if you enjoyed this episode, please like, comment, or subscribe. Visit multifamilymedianetwork.com to learn more about our other exceptional industry podcasts, thought pieces, and sponsorship opportunities.